afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being with us. I am joined this afternoon by the Framingham Chief of Police, Lester Baker, by Detective Lieutenant William Donahue from the Massachusetts State Police, Framingham Police Lieutenant Blaise Tersoni, and Assistant District Attorneys Tom Brandt and Ryan Rawl. This is a day that has been much awaited, and it comes just shortly before there'll be an arraignment at 2 o'clock today in the Superior Court of Stephen Paul Gale. Mr. Gale will be arraigned on 4 counts of aggravated rape, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of armed robbery. Those charges arise out of an incident on December 27th, 1989, when Mr. Gale is alleged to have entered the Hit or Miss store in Framingham, showed a handgun, and forced 2 female employees to the back of the store before robbing and sexually assaulting them. For 34 years, the identity of that assailant remained unknown. That ultimately changed in 2024, when using investigative genetic genealogy, we developed new leads that allowed us to identify Stephen Gale as the alleged perpetrator. This was a major development, but it was met with mixed emotions because despite significant collaboration from law enforcement across the country, Gale could not be located. Finally, on the 8th of August of 2024, detectives from the LA Police Department's Gang and Narcotics Division, along with members of the United States Marshals Apprehension Task Force, set up surveillance in the area of the California Yacht Marina, located at 718 Peninsula Road in Wilmington, California. They did that because task force personnel had received information that the defendant was living on a yacht that was docked there. At approximately 3:40 in the afternoon, a male matching the defendant's general description was seen getting off a yacht, which was named the Dior, and getting into a maroon Lincoln SUV. That individual drove that SUV out of the marina. The officers attempted a traffic stop, but the driver failed to yield, and a vehicle pursuit ensued. Additional units from the LAPD joined that pursuit, using lights and sirens attempting to stop the vehicle. The Lincoln traveled on multiple roads, including the 110 freeway, the 405 freeway around the LAX area, and around the Westwood, West Los Angeles area, all while being followed by a caravan of police vehicles. At one point, the driver of that SUV ran a red light. At other points, the police unsuccessfully deployed strike strips and attempted a precision immobilization technique maneuver where they attempted to box in that car and move it over. The driver used evasive measures to continue to escape. There was a second attempt using spike strips when the driver was on Westwood Boulevard. That use was successful, and both tires on the driver's side of the Lincoln were deflated. The driver then entered the UCLA Medical Plaza roundabout and came to a stop. In total, that pursuit had lasted approximately 82 minutes and covered approximately 40 miles. The driver, identified as Stephen Paul Gale, was taken into custody and his identity was confirmed. During that pursuit, an acquaintance of the defendant had tried to throw a package into his vehicle. That package was recovered by LA police officers and found to contain money, a cell phone, and an insurance card issued in an alias. Upon his arrest, the defendant had in his possession a number of credit cards, identification cards with different names and companies on them. The pursuit and the defendant's subsequent arrest were broadcast live. Upon seeing those events played out on television, an individual contacted the Framingham Police Department to report that she recognized the defendant to be a person that she had known for years as an individual named Paul Costa. She explained that Mr. Costa had been hired by members of her family to oversee the daily and financial obligations, including the paying of payroll, from a family trust. That trust had paid the defendant's company over $1.5 million in the preceding 18 months, up until August of 2024. Over the many years that this case remained unresolved, victims, their families, and the community at large endured a painful and frustrating wait. It was marked by many false starts and moments of uncertainty. We are, as I said at the beginning, very grateful to have reached this moment, and today to have him here to formally be arraigned for his actions. This long pursuit and the ultimate arraignment and the beginning of holding the defendant accountable illustrates our commitment to continually reassessing cases, rooting out new leads, and employing the latest technologies. Although it will be our assistant district attorneys who will stand before the judge today, we would not be here without the help of the public and law enforcement agencies across the country who helped to share photos of Mr. Gale, interview individuals, and really share the commitment that we have to holding him accountable. And one of the foremost partners in that pursuit that has spanned multiple years is the Framingham Police Department. And I'm pleased to turn it over to Framingham Police Chief Baker, because he and his team have played an integral role both in the initial investigation of this case and up to the retrieval and bringing back of the defendant over this weekend. Chief Baker.
Thank you. Just wanted to thank some of our partners, and I'm going to start off with my own men and women at the Framingham Police Department. There are detectives who have since retired that need to be acknowledged, and I want to thank them and thank the current Bureau of Investigations that is led by Lieutenant Blaze Jassoni. They never gave up on this case, continued to follow leads, and just kept after it. I want to thank Kenji Inaba from the University of Southern California Medical Center, the Chief of the Los Angeles Police Department, Jim McDonald, the Los Angeles Police Robbery Homicide Division assigned to the U.S. Marshals Apprehension Task Force, Parabon Nanolabs, the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, the Boston Police Department, the Boston Police Department Sexual Assault Initiative Team, the Nevada Secretary of State Office, the Investigation Division of the State of Nevada, the Las Vegas Metro Police Department, the State Police Violent Apprehension Unit, the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Thanking our local, state, and federal partners across the country that made this possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. We'll take a few questions.
You talked about the family that you learned about that he is accused of stealing money from. Talk about how did he work his way into that family?
I think that part of what we know, and this is still an ongoing piece of the investigation, is the defendant was very adept at setting up various kinds of companies, offering different services, making acquaintance with folks who frankly had lots of money. We know, for instance, that yacht that he was living on was valued at between $750,000 and $1 million. So he was very skilled at making connections with people, gaining their trust, being put in positions where he had access to lots of money, and being able to use that to maintain the life that he was living essentially undercover.
And all these years on the run, what does it mean to you to have him here in Massachusetts, ready to face the charges?
It's important to us that he be brought back here where he committed these offenses, and we begin this process in court today of holding him accountable. But more than for us, what is always my hope in these cases is that for people watching and hearing about this case, many of whom may have had family members or have been themselves the victim of a case that is unresolved, it is our commitment that we do not forget and we do not give up. And while we get to a place where we're able to say we did these things and we were able to develop new leads that ultimately resulted in the charging and then the apprehension of this defendant, effort is not always reflected in results. We spend an enormous amount of our time working really constantly on our unresolved cases. And there are many, many efforts that don't come to fruition in this way. It seems simple when you get to this place, but when we are able to bring someone to justice after a long time, it really is the results of hundreds and hundreds of hours, and as the chief said, people who never gave up on cases.
One other quick question. At the time that this happened, there was a task force that thought that this attacker was responsible for several rapes and robberies that were very similar in the area. Understanding these occurred in different counties, but what are the chances that Stephen Gale could be prosecuted for those crimes?
That will depend on the specific evidence and the timing with respect to that. As you know, in this case, we were fortunate to have a DNA profile. That is what allowed us so many years later to use the investigative genetic genealogy. Not all of those cases have that kind of forensic evidence. It'll also depend on the viability of the cases. We have in these cases, as you know well, the women that were victimized in these cases have been really involved in what's happened, are willing to go forward. That is not always the case, that people are able or willing to do that. And it also will depend on the timing of when things occurred. So it's a variety of factors as to those other multiple incidents.
And as you learn more, do you believe these cases are linked?
I think there are lots of similarities. It is easy to say, looking from the outside, yes, they all look the same. What comes here is the work of parsing through all of those cases, talking to the people who are involved, and being able to put the case together in a way that if we proceed, or some other county is able to proceed, that we are able to reach a just result.
Can you explain the 4 rape charges, because there were 2 victims in this case? Can you explain how these?
There were different forms of sexual assault. As you know, sexual assault can occur in a variety of ways, whether it be penal, digital, or others. So there are different sexual acts that occurred on those 2 women.
Have you been in touch with the 2 women to tell them that today was the arraignment? Can you talk
Yes.
a little bit about their reactions to today?
I think that obviously relief, as I've said, this has been a very up and down journey for them. For instance, when we announced that we had identified the defendant, then we couldn't find him. Then we found him in California. That was in August. It's obviously been a long road getting him back here. And we are at the beginning of the court process, which is itself another long road.
And can you talk a little bit about what took so long? You did say this happened in August, that he was found. What, was he in the hospital? What was?
He's had a number of health issues that have had him hospitalized and out of the hospital, and then he had to be able to travel here this weekend to be brought back.
And can you talk about that travel? What are the logistics? What goes into bringing him back from LA across country?
So whenever we are bringing anyone back, we would typically send some of the troopers assigned to our office, as well as some of the local department assigned to that case. They then have to coordinate with law enforcement in that city, whether it be making an arrest, or if someone's already in custody, coordinating with the correctional officials, ensuring that that person, in the case of someone like this defendant who has health issues, is actually going to be well enough to be put on a plane. You heard the chief thank one of the doctors. There was a doctor who accompanied the defendant back here so that we could ensure that there would not be a medical situation that would arise in the middle of that transnational flight.
And how intense and close was it in this transport and getting him on the plane?
I would say we are all happy to be here this afternoon when the defendant is now at the courthouse and ready to be arraigned. It is, first of all, anytime we bring a prisoner, it is a well choreographed ballet that has to happen to get everybody lined up and in the right places to bring them back. When you add in the distance here as well as this medical situation, it's a complicated situation to affect it. And both the state police and the Framingham police did a great job this weekend in working with their partners on the West Coast in having that doctor come back with him, so we were able to ensure that it really went flawlessly.
And did he put up any concerns or fight in terms of?
It all went as well as one could expect in bringing somebody back.
We were here for the press conference when you said that this was the person you were looking for. You put up the different pictures. Can you tell us about the leads that you got, and did any of those leads actually lead to that yacht club?
You know, every piece of information helps us. It's not necessarily that one person says that's him and that's where they are. People give you little bits of information, and really we had the list that the chief named of investigative partners who helped us to put that together and ultimately get to that place where, as I mentioned, we had some information that he might be on that yacht to set up surveillance. We didn't know if we were gonna find him or not. They'd been out there for multiple hours before they saw somebody that matched that description, and then they were able to confirm who it was. So it is a long, like every part of this case, it's been a long process.
Have you personally had an opportunity to speak with him? Have you personally had an opportunity to speak to him, the suspect?
We would not, at this point, he's had an attorney appointed, and that's the way conversation will obviously happen.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.